I'm really getting into the environmental impact of synthetic clothing. And it's a topic that probably as conservationists in the room, a lot of us may have dabbled in before, but I would say it's a topic that is really overshadowed by a lot of other conservation topics. But the impact that our clothing has and how our clothing is made and where it goes after it dies is a really big passion of mine. So I want to just give a little bit of background about what's called fast fashion, and what does that mean? How is fashion becoming fast? Today we are buying 60% more clothes than we did 15 years ago, but we're only keeping our clothing for about half as long. What was crazy to me, there was a survey in UK that found that 1/3 of women considered their garments old if they had just been worn 2 times. And that's insane. That the entire process of what goes into making clothing, it starts to make clothing feel and resemble more like single-use plastics, and water bottles and things like that when it's used for such a short period of time. And after clothing dies, if you will, an estimated 85% of all textiles globally are going into landfills. And I'll show you why that really matters. 65% of that clothing is made from plastic. So, if you're familiar with the labels inside of your clothes, you might look to see the washing instructions, and it's usually labeled, polyester, nylon, linen, cotton. Well, polyester, nylon, acrylic, those are all synthetic fibers that take up to 500 years to biodegrade. And that's in landfill, in the ocean, wherever they end up, compared to like a linen fabric can actually biodegrade within 2 weeks, once you put it into the dirt. So that's a massive difference, on time scale and lifespan of these fabrics. And so you might be thinking too, like, oh, I want clothing that lasts a long. I want durable clothing when I go on my hike that lasts a long time. So I'm going to buy polyesters, but just remember that durability might be quite a bit longer than you were hoping, and you might be sending it to a landfill at the end of its life. And even while we own our clothing, every time you wash a polyester shirt, a study estimated that up to 70,000 tiny pieces of plastic fibers break off. And how our sewer systems are set up for filtration, up to about 40% of those tiny plastic fibers end up actually entering our rivers, lakes, and our ocean. So these are considered microplastics, which you might have heard of before. There was news a while back about microbeads, and like little microplastics in soaps, and how water bottles break down into microplastics. Well, fibers and fabrics also are considered to be microplastics, that are floating in our oceans, and they are consumed by ocean wildlife who mistake it for food, or by ocean wildlife who are filter feeders and just take any water, that passes through their mouth. And so, as you would expect, and ingesting plastic isn't necessarily a safe practice, for health, for bodies, and for ecosystems. There is still a lot of research that I believe needs to be done on this topic. So for today, I really wanted to create a a portal into conversation to talk about microplastics, and I wanted to do this the best way I knew how, which is through textiles. Um, like Lee said when she introduced me, I was actually thinking about doing a little like documentary type thing, and then I realized like I don't know how to make a video, so why did I propose that? So I switched to doing. I want to do a tapestry, and that's because my background is actually in textile arts. I have a slow fashion, handmade clothing business called Charlie Darwin Textiles, and you can see some of the photos of my clothing here. But I use all natural fibers and all natural dyes for my clothing, and I really wanted to also kind of bridge this project into my own brand and kind of create a conversation with my audience to talk more about the importance of fibers and dyes. So my goal with this project with Creature Conserve is really to enrich the intentions behind my clothing brand by sparking some conversation surrounding textile overconsumption and synthetic fiber pollution. So I started off, I want to walk you guys through the process of how I made this. I'm not going to show you the actual finished piece until the very end. I want to walk you through the process because for me, that's how it went as well. I came up with like a drawing design and I was like, I don't know, maybe it'll look something like this. And it really transformed as I went along. So I want to take you guys through that for that reason, as well as I think with clothing, there is a lack of transparency about how things are made and who made them. And so I think it's important to bring that conversation into textiles and textile art and talk more about how each stitch, how I dyed everything, and walk you through that process so you can think a little deeper about one step to the next. So my first stage was planning a tapestry. And of course, like any modern artist, I just like dug deep on Pinterest and curated a nice board of some different stitching and dyes. And I came up with this concept of having thrifted, like a thrifted patchwork of shirts, kind of like a quilted top section here, and then have the fibers from those shirts up top be kind of threaded into an ocean down below. That was going to be real fibrous, and I wanted to have the top be a lot of polyester fibers and the bottom portion be a lot of like all natural linen fibers. So from here, my first step was to collect some clothing that I would be using to incorporate into my project. And the clothing was really fun to gather. So this is clothing compiled both from my closet, my boyfriend's closet, and a neighbor who moved out and had thrown a bunch of clothes just in the trash. And so I got some of those out, which a lot of it was kind of gross, but for the sake of art, I sacrificed my hands and my white wall and hung it up anyway. So I'll show you just three of my favorite pieces closer up. These fuzzy socks on the left are socks my mom probably gave me like 15 years ago, and I can feel the texture. If you guys, see pictures of your own clothes, you know exactly what they feel like. And these fuzzy socks never match any of my clothes. They look so disgusting on me. But they were one thing I could find in my wardrobe that was definitely a polyester fabric. And these other two, the purse in the center and the yellow raincoat on the right, those were from my neighbor's trash. And yeah, I don't know. Enough said. They have a texture that I think you guys can all imagine feeling, that sort of plasticky feel. So my first step was thinking about that quilted part up top. I needed to plan it out. What did I want it to look like? So I got 1x1 inch square crops of all the textures photographed so that I could plan it out on Adobe Illustrator and play with color placement. I decided I think it would be nice if I'm going to go right into the ocean to do a sort of sunset so that there's somewhat of a narrative image here. So I pieced them together on a rendering and then actually cut them out and sewed them up in real life, pieced together 112 fabric squares. And this part was just hilarious because I did not think ahead of time about what it would be like to iron all mostly plastic fabrics. So if anyone in the room is a quilter, you know that rule number one is that ironing is key. And so it was really funny to try and press all of these seams open. And you can see some of the yellow rain jacket got a little warped there. Luckily my iron survived, but I actually did break a couple sewing machine needles when I had to go through a corner that had 2 fuzzy socks and a sweater. Um, so that was pretty fun to piece together, and I really love the finished outcome there for the top. Then I wanted to experiment a little bit with a middle portion, which wasn't actually shown in my design that I showed you guys, but I wanted to see how can I transition from these more solid pieces of fabric down into the ocean. And so I started slashing my fabric into real tiny bits and pieces, and as small as I could get them without them just turning to dust. And so from there, I found a method I hadn't tried before, but I found it online, of sandwiching my fibers in between the stabilizer that washes away. So I spread out all of my fibers on the stabilizer, and I actually put a second piece on top, pinned it together, and then I stitched all over it like a crazy person. Um, so it basically is being all held together by these stitches, and then that stabilizer washes away. So I came out with this really beautiful netting of crazy maniac fibers. Plus, I think the thread really adds another element of loose fiber to this piece. So third now, I was thinking, okay, I got to make my ocean somehow, and I decided to go with indigo dye, and I do my own indigo vat here in my little studio office. And this is the beautiful blue color that it comes out as on the bottom. And I decided that I wanted to use fish as my sort of sea ocean wildlife imagery towards the bottom of my tapestry. So again, I had to do some internet sleuthing of how to do applique, a sort of quilting process where you piecework a lot of times irregular shapes together. And I drew out this fish design, and I actually cut out all of my pieces for my fish out of scraps of naturally dyed fibers I have. So the fabrics here have been dyed with red onions, yellow onions, black beans, black tea, um, and make really beautiful colors. And so I got linen and cotton dyed with all these things to provide a nice contrast to my upper portion. Did a lot of stitching at this stage, hand sewing and machine stitching. You can see my little machine working away. And then I started to play around with piecing my 3 tiers together here. So I used hand stitching because I think it really provides a nice imagery of visible fibers to stitch my 3 tiers together. And I ended up with this final wall hanging that I love. I'm loving how it turns out. And I hung it up on a plastic cheapy clothes hanger here. And I'm going to walk you through, now that we've seen the final piece and you've gotten here with me, I'm just going to walk you through real quick and show you from top to bottom in more detail. This piece I think is best seen in real life, like some other artists on here today. But I'm going to do my best to show through photography real quick. So that top plastic hanger, I actually have taped there, and it's not holding up the weight of the tapestry itself. I think it would break. They break so easily, and I am interested to see if I hang it without the tape holding it up, if it will actually be able to hold the weight of a tapestry, because these hangers are just made to break, it seems like, and to go in the trash. And I think the textures all together, we've already seen this, but seeing it flow into that bottom scramble is quite chaotic. And one of my favorite images here is on the left, that fuzzy sock. You can almost see like the heel of the fuzzy sock kind of folding back. Really gives some interesting texture. Here's that middle portion a little bit closer up. And you can see how the threads actually are kind of weaving all of the fabrics together. And what's really interesting about this process is that in some places where there wasn't as much fabric, you get just thread that's kind of like a spider web, a hollow spider web. And here's our bottom portion here of the fibers flowing in into the flow of the water. And I really, was hoping to capture here. Me and Lee talked quite a bit about that contrast between what we thought was pretty and ugly. And you can be the one to decide what's pretty and ugly. I know some people think that natural fibers and natural dyes are dull and boring and ugly. But from my viewpoint, I really saw the top two tiers of this as being that ugly, bright, obnoxious fabric that really contrasts with the beautiful earth tones of the ocean and the fish and the natural dyes and the natural fibers. Here's some more up close stitching shots. I don't want this hand stitching to go unnoticed because this took a really long time, so I'm hoping it translates well over the internet here. All right, and so as I get to the end here, I just want to say what my plans are going forward with this. I think I would love to see it shown in person somewhere to really share the texture, because it is such a shame for two reasons. I made a tapestry because it's what I'm good at, but it's also something that's easy to roll up and hide away in my closet forever, which is, something I think all artists fear, is spending so much time on something and then it being hidden away. So I would like to actually try and get this shown in person somewhere. And, it also really inspired me to do some sort of community, maybe another piece that is more community involved, because I know for me, when I look at this, the pieces of fabric that stand out most to me are that fuzzy sock, the hamburger sock, the things that have been in my closet for several years now. And so I think it would be really interesting to have donations from several community members, and make another similar piece to this. And so people, I think, when you see something you've worn every day represented in an art piece, it means a lot more to you. So I think that could be another interesting turn to take with this concept. And ultimately, I just really want to thank again Lee for all of her support, and to everyone in the Creature Conserve cohort who gave me a lot of really great feedback along the way and helped this project become what it is. So thank you guys so much. And if you want to reach me or check out my clothing or other projects, my website's here, and I'll drop it in the chat box. And I'd also love it if you follow me on Instagram and follow along with the process. Thank you guys.